It was a winter night in 1970, cold enough to draw the warmth straight out from between my bones. I woke up shivering. The window in our mud brick house wasn't sealed properly, and the icy wind slipped through the cracks, scraping against my face like tiny knives. When I opened my eyes, I saw last year's corn cobs still hanging from the rafters, and a thin layer of white frost had formed along the wall. This wasn't the frozen riverbed where I had died. This was the family housing in the military compound, the home I shared with Ethan Miller. I sat up suddenly, pain shooting through every bone in my body. It wasn't from the cold. It was from the injuries I'd suffered when Ethan Miller and Rachel Moore pushed me into the frozen lake in my previous life. Ethan was my husband, the regiment commander. Rachel was my poor, widowed sister-in-law. After her husband died in service, I had kindly taken her in to live with me. Who could have imagined that the child everyone pitied, the so-called martyr's orphan she held in her arms, was actually Ethan's? Even when I died, I never heard a single word of apology. All I heard was Rachel's soft, mocking voice whispering by my ear, "Lisa, you've held the title of the commander's wife long enough. It's time to let it go." My throat was so dry it hurt. I was just about to get out of bed to find some water when I heard footsteps outside the courtyard gate, followed by a woman's gentle voice coaxing a child. "Be good, sweetheart. Sleep a little longer. Later, Uncle Ethan will bring you some candy." Uncle Ethan. I clenched the coarse bedding tightly in my hands, my nails digging deep into my palms. That title, Uncle Ethan, was what had deceived me in my last life. I had thought Ethan was simply being kind to a fallen soldier's child. It wasn't until after I died, when my spirit drifted above the compound, that I saw him sneaking into Rachel's room at midnight, saw him tenderly changing the baby's diaper, his eyes filled with a gentleness he had never once shown me. A faint rustling came from under the bed. It was the old wooden chest I had shoved there before I went to sleep. In my past life, I had always thought it took up too much space, and had planned to chop it up for firewood. But Ethan stopped me, saying it could be used to store things. Now I realized that maybe it hid something they didn't want me to see. Quietly, I slid to the edge of the bed and lifted the blanket. My fingers brushed against the cold wooden surface of the chest. Just as I was about to pull it out, the courtyard gate creaked open. Rachel's voice came from outside. "Lisa, are you awake? I made some millet porridge. I'll bring you a bowl." I quickly pulled my hand back, lay down again, and pulled the quilt up over me. Forcing my voice to sound weak and hoarse, I said, "I'm awake. Come in." The door opened. Rachel walked in holding a chipped porcelain bowl, wearing the floral cotton jacket I had sewn for her last year. She set the bowl on the small table beside the bed and smiled softly. "It's cold, and you're still weak. Drink some porridge to warm yourself up. Oh, and Ethan said he'll be back from the training field tonight. He asked me to make some extra cornbread." As she spoke, her eyes kept darting toward the space beneath the bed, her fingers nervously rubbing the rim of the bowl. That was her habit whenever she felt guilty. In my last life, I'd never noticed it. But now I saw everything clearly. I looked at the child in her arms, Charlie, wearing a small outfit I had sewn from Ethan's old uniform. Around his neck hung a tiny silver lock, engraved with half of the letter E. "I'll drink the porridge later," I said, sitting up and deliberately glancing toward the bed. "What's in that chest under there? I couldn't find my sewing kit the other day. Is it inside?" Rachel's face instantly went pale. She rushed over to block my view. "Oh, it's just some old clothes. Let me find it for you. You just woke up, don't catch a chill." As she reached out to stop me, I moved back and accidentally bumped into the table. The bowl toppled over, spilling its contents onto the floor. The hot millet porridge splattered everywhere, steam rising with the faint smell of burnt grain. Rachel gasped, crouching down in a panic. "Oh no, what a waste. I worked so hard to cook that." Watching her flustered movements, I couldn't help but sneer inwardly. The more she tried to stop me, the more certain I was that something was hidden in that chest. After she finished cleaning up the mess and left the room with the baby in her arms, I clearly saw her slip something into her jacket. A piece of paper that had fallen from the crack of the wooden chest. The moment she stepped out, I pulled the chest toward me. Using the iron poker beside the bed, I pried open the lock. Just as I suspected, there were no old clothes inside the chest, only a few pieces of baby clothing and a yellowed slip of paper. On it, written hastily in pencil, were the words, "Dr. Wang, West City Health Clinic." The handwriting was rough and uneven, as if the writer had been afraid of being recognized. I clenched the note tightly in my hand until my knuckles turned white. Dr. Wang, West City Health Clinic. I had never heard that name in my previous life. But the paper Rachel had hurriedly tucked into her jacket earlier looked almost exactly the same. If I wanted to uncover the truth about the child's parentage, I had to find this Dr. Wang first. The wind outside was still howling, but the chill in my heart had begun to fade, replaced by a quiet, burning determination. In my past life, I had died in ignorance. In this one, heaven had given me another chance to settle every debt with Ethan Miller and Rachel Moore. I hid the note in the inner pocket of my padded jacket, covered the chest again, and lay back down under the blanket, waiting for Ethan to return. I wanted to see if, when he faced me, he could still pretend to be the devoted husband he once claimed to be. When Rachel left the house holding her child, she deliberately reminded me to stay home and rest, telling me not to move around too much. But her tone carried a trace of caution she couldn't quite conceal. I nodded stiffly, waiting until her footsteps outside the courtyard faded completely before turning back toward the bed. I pulled out the wooden chest again. The iron poker had left a few scratches on the lock, and I needed to cover my tracks before Ethan returned and noticed anything. Aside from the note with Dr. Wang's name, there was also a red cloth pouch inside the chest. I opened it carefully and found half of a silver locket. The engraving matched perfectly with the one hanging around the child's neck. When joined together, they formed a complete letter E. I slipped the half locket into my pocket and folded the note into a small square, tucking it between the layers of my jacket. Then I restored the chest to its original position, covered it with an old rag, and swept every bit of wood dust under the bed. Just as I finished cleaning up, I heard voices and laughter from the alley. Other military families heading to the cafeteria for lunch. It was around 10 in the morning. Rachel would probably go there to fetch food and chat with the other wives for at least half an hour. That was enough time for me to make a trip to the West City Health Clinic. I changed into a gray cotton coat, tied up my hair, and tucked 2 dimes and half a pound of ration tickets into my pocket. Then, quietly, I slipped out through the back gate. The military housing complex was in the eastern part of town. The clinic was about 3 miles west along a frozen dirt road. The wind bit at my face as I hurried forward, my cotton shoes crunching on the snow with every step. I didn't dare slow down. In my last life, it was my slowness, my blindness, that had allowed Ethan and Rachel's betrayal to unfold unchecked. In this life, I wouldn't waste a single minute. The West City Health Clinic was a small, old brick building with a weathered wooden sign that was already peeling. Inside, it was quiet and cold, with only a single nurse sweeping the hallway. I approached her and asked, "Is Dr. Wang here today?" The nurse looked me up and down and asked warily, "What do you want with Dr. Wang? He retired last year. Sometimes he still comes in to help out." "I'm his distant niece," I said quickly, forcing a smile. "I brought him something from home." The lie rolled off my tongue easily, but my heart sank. If he was retired, finding him might not be easy, and if he wasn't here, this lead could go cold. Fortunately, the nurse was kind enough to point toward the back courtyard. "He's here this morning, just finished seeing an old lady. Go check the back building." A thin wisp of smoke was rising from the chimney of a small 1-story house in the back. As I approached the door, I heard someone coughing inside. I knocked softly. A moment later, the door opened, and an elderly man with graying hair appeared. He wore a faded white coat and held a stethoscope in one hand. This must be Dr. Wang. He frowned slightly when he saw me. "Yes? Who are you?" "I'm from Commander Ethan Miller's household," I said, skipping the niece story and going straight to the truth. "I'd like to ask you about something." I wanted to see how he would react to Ethan's name. As expected, Dr. Wang's face instantly changed. He stepped back half a pace and tried to close the door. "I don't know any Commander Miller. You've got the wrong person. Dr. Wang, please, don't close the door." I quickly reached out to stop him, pulling from my coat pocket the half of the silver locket. You recognize this, don't you? Last year you did a blood test for a child. This locket was used as the identifying token, wasn't it? Dr. Wang's gaze fell on the locket. His lips trembled slightly, and his hand hesitated on the door. Then he loosened his grip, leaving a small gap open. I took the chance to slip inside. A small coal stove was burning in the corner, filling the room with faint warmth and the smell of smoke. He sat down heavily on the heated brick bed, sighing. What do you want to know? There are things I can't say. Commander Miller made me promise. If I talked, there'd be trouble. If there's trouble, it should fall on him, not you. I set the locket on the table. That blood test he asked you to run, it confirmed the child was his, didn't it? And he told you to keep it a secret from everyone, including me, his lawful wife. Am I right? Dr. Wang lowered his head further, his fingers twisting the edge of his coat. I didn't have a choice. Commander Miller is a powerful man. He said if I didn't help him, my son wouldn't be allowed to stay in the army. The test did show that the child was his. When the results came out, he even gave me 50 yuan as hush money. 50 yuan in 1970, that was a huge amount. Ethan Miller certainly hadn't hesitated to spend money on his illegitimate child. Where's that test report now? I pressed. Do you still have it? Dr. Wang immediately shook his head. He took it the same day. I don't have anything left, except, his voice dropped lower. I kept a receipt, just in case. Proof that he paid me. I hid it so he couldn't deny it later. Where is that receipt? I leaned forward, my heart racing. This was the evidence I needed. He pointed toward the wooden cabinet beside the bed. It's locked in the bottom drawer. The key's under my pillow. He had just turned to get it when we suddenly heard footsteps outside the courtyard and a voice calling, Dr. Wang, are you home? Dr. Wang's face went pale. He quickly pushed me toward the inner room. It's the head doctor of the clinic. Hide. He knows Commander Miller. Without thinking, I ducked behind the curtain inside the back room. I heard Dr. Wang open the door and greet the man, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might burst from my chest. If the clinic director saw me, I'd lose everything, and the evidence would be gone. Fortunately, the director had only come to fetch an old patient file. After a brief exchange, he left. Once the footsteps faded, Dr. Wang rushed to the cabinet, unlocked the drawer, and handed me a folded slip of paper. Take it. Don't let anyone see it. His signature is on it. This will help you. I took the receipt, my hands trembling. On it was written, received from Dr. Wang, payment for services, 50 yuan. Ethan Miller. The date was last fall, right around the time Rachel Moore had become pregnant. I folded the receipt carefully and tucked it into the lining of my coat. Then I picked up the silver locket and said softly, Thank you, Dr. Wang. Don't worry, I won't drag you into this. When I stepped out of the clinic, the wind had calmed a little. The sunlight filtered weakly through the clouds, bringing a touch of warmth. I gripped the inside of my coat where the receipt lay hidden, feeling steadier now. With this receipt, and once I found the blood test report, I could finally expose Ethan Miller and Rachel Moore for who they really were. When I slipped back into the house through the rear courtyard, I heard the sound of a bicycle bell outside the gate. Ethan was home. My heart skipped. I quickly hid the receipt and the silver locket beneath the bedding, then wiped the dust off my hands with a rag. Just as I finished, the door swung open. Ethan Miller stepped in wearing his dark green military coat, a canvas bag slung over his shoulder. His face showed signs of fatigue from the field exercises, but in his eyes I saw a glint of scrutiny, a look I knew all too well. He dropped the bag onto the table with a dull thud. Ethan walked in with a smile, his voice warm and casual. Lisa, I'm back. I brought you something nice. He reached into his canvas bag and pulled out 2 yards of floral fabric, a peony pattern, the most popular design that year. Last time you said you wanted some flowered cloth for new seat covers, right? I asked one of the logistics guys to get this from the city. In my previous life, when he handed me this same piece of fabric, I had been so happy I couldn't sleep the whole night. I had truly believed he cared about me. But now, looking at the same cloth, all I felt was bitterness. The money he spent on fabric for me came from the same pocket that supported another woman and his illegitimate child. I took the fabric, pretending to be pleasantly surprised. This is such beautiful material. It must have cost a lot. You should have saved the money to buy yourself a new pair of shoes instead. Yours are nearly worn through. Ethan's expression softened slightly. He reached out as if to touch my hair, but I quickly turned away, pretending to busy myself. You must be thirsty after the trip, I said, using the excuse to fetch him a bowl of hot water. His hand froze midair. His face stiffened for a moment, but he didn't say anything. He turned and sat on the edge of the bed, his gaze drifting unconsciously toward the space beneath it, checking to see if the wooden chest had been moved. When I came back with the hot water, Rachel entered, holding the baby in one arm and carrying a basket of cornbread in the other. Her eyes lit up the moment she saw Ethan. She hurried over, smiling brightly. Ethan, you're finally back. The baby's been crying for you all morning. As she spoke, she placed the child directly into Ethan's arms. The baby had just turned 1, too young to speak yet, but he really did reach out, wrapping his tiny hands around Ethan's neck, babbling happily. Ethan's smile softened instantly, overflowing with tenderness as he gently rocked the boy. Missed your uncle, huh? Uncle brought you some candy. He pulled a fruit drop from his pocket, unwrapped it, and pushed it toward the child's mouth. Standing nearby, I almost lost my grip on the bowl of hot water. In my past life, I'd thought their closeness came from sympathy, that Ethan simply cared for Rachel and the child as a good man would. But now, I saw the truth. The affection in his eyes wasn't something he could hide anymore. Rachel stood beside him, pretending to tidy up the table and arrange the cornbread, but I caught the secret glance she threw Ethan, full of smug satisfaction, sharp as a needle in my chest. During dinner, Rachel kept piling food into Ethan's bowl. Ethan, you must not have eaten well during the field exercises. Eat more. This cornbread's made from fine flour. I saved it just for you. I forced a smile. Rachel, don't just serve Ethan. You should eat too. Taking care of a child is hard work. Rachel froze for a split second, then smiled quickly. It's not hard. As long as Ethan and the baby are doing well, I'm happy. She emphasized the baby just enough to make her point. Ethan put down his chopsticks and looked at me. Lisa, how have you been feeling lately? Do you need someone from the medical unit to check on you? He was testing me, to see if I had discovered anything. I lowered my gaze and sighed softly. I'm fine. I'm just worried about the baby. He's been sick a lot lately. Remember that fever he had last time? It lasted for days. It broke my heart to see him like that. I turned toward Ethan, my voice calm but deliberate. You know a lot of people. Maybe you can find a good doctor to take a proper look at him. I heard there's a Dr. Wang at the West City Health Clinic, who's excellent. Why don't we take the baby there for a full checkup? The moment the words left my mouth, Ethan's face changed. The chopsticks slipped from his fingers and clattered loudly onto the table. Rachel's expression froze in panic. She quickly blurted out, Sister, there's no need to bother Ethan. The baby just has a little cold. He'll be fine in a few days. How can that be? I raised my voice on purpose. The baby's the child of a fallen soldier. If something happens to him, how could we ever face his father's sacrifice? I already spoke to Dr. Wang. He said he's available anytime. We just need to bring the baby over. Ethan's fists tightened at his sides. His knuckles had gone white from tension, yet he forced a calm expression. The unit's been busy lately, he said, his voice carefully steady. We'll talk about it when I have time. The doctors in the medical unit are fine, no need to go all the way to West City. He avoided my eyes, picking up his chopsticks to stir the rice in his bowl. But the appetite he'd had earlier was gone. I hid a cold smile. The more he tried to dodge the subject, the clearer it was. He was terrified that Dr. Wang might reveal the truth. I didn't push further. Instead, I quietly added another piece of cornbread to my plate and chewed slowly. The air around the table grew heavy, suffocating. Rachel opened her mouth a few times as if to say something, but Ethan's sharp glance kept her silent. After dinner, Ethan muttered that he needed to go to the office to handle some paperwork and hurried out. As Rachel gathered the dishes, she leaned close to me and whispered, Lisa, please don't mention Dr. Wang to Ethan again. He's been in a bad mood lately. Don't upset him. I just want what's best for the baby. I pulled my hand away, pretending not to understand her warning. Don't worry, Rachel. I'll make sure to take good care of the baby. I won't let him suffer. She looked at me, her eyes full of unease, but she didn't say another word. She turned quickly and slipped into her room. I walked to the bed, lifted the bedding, and looked at the receipt and silver locket hidden underneath. Ethan was already becoming suspicious. I had to find that paternity report soon, before anything else happened. The sky outside slowly darkened. One by one, the lights in the military housing compound flickered on. I knew Ethan wouldn't really be in his office tonight. He would end up in Rachel's room. They'd be plotting what to do about me. When night finally fell, the compound went quiet. The lights went out one after another, until only the occasional beam of a soldier's flashlight swept past the courtyard wall. I lay on the bed, listening to the muffled sounds from next door, Rachel soothing the baby, Ethan's low voice beside her. So I was right. They were together, whispering about their next move. Once the footsteps outside had completely faded, I got up quietly, slipped a small flashlight from under the bedding, wrapped myself tightly in my cotton coat, and crept out the door. Ethan had said he was going to the office to handle files, but at this hour, no one stayed in the office building. Most likely, he'd gone there to wait until the patrols thinned before sneaking back into Rachel's room. I had to use this window of time to search his office for the paternity test report. The regiment headquarters building wasn't far, just a 5-minute walk, but every step made my heart pound faster. Halfway there, I spotted 2 soldiers on patrol and quickly ducked behind a stack of firewood near the path. I waited until their footsteps faded before slipping out again. Only the duty room on the first floor of the office building was lit. The man on watch, old John, was nearly deaf and spent most nights dozing in his chair. I'd learned that in my past life. I circled around to the back of the building, where one of the windows had been broken and covered with a loose wooden plank. It gave easily when I pressed on it. I remembered Ethan once drunkenly mentioning this very window, how he'd deliberately broken it so he could climb in when he worked late. Now, I realized the truth. It wasn't for work. It was for sneaking in and out during his secret meetings with Rachel. I climbed onto the windowsill, carefully pushed aside the plank, and slipped inside. The room was a storage closet, cluttered with old files and brooms. Switching on the flashlight, I crept down the corridor toward Ethan's office, each creak of the wooden floor making me flinch. His office was at the far end of the second floor. The wooden sign on the door read, Regimental Commander's Office. I pulled out a thin piece of wire I'd taken from the old chest back home. I'd practiced on old locks before, never thinking I'd actually have to use the skill one day. I slid the wire into the keyhole and turned it gently. After a few quiet clicks, snap, the lock gave way. I pushed the door open. A faint mix of smoke and ink filled the air. I stepped inside, walked straight to the desk, and shone the flashlight over the drawers. In my past life, I used to help him tidy this office. I knew there was a small iron box hidden inside the false bottom of the lowest drawer. I pulled open the drawer and, just as I expected, my fingers brushed against something cold. An iron box. A small brass lock hung from the latch. My heart pounded. Ethan always kept a small bronze key on the ring attached to his belt, but he wasn't here. I couldn't risk going back home to look for it. I searched frantically through every inch of his desk, opening compartments and shifting stacks of papers. Finally, inside the pen holder, I found it, hidden between the brushes. The backup key had been tucked into a false slot in the holder, concealed behind a writing brush. No one would have found it without knowing to look. When I unlocked the box, my breath caught. Inside was exactly what I'd hoped for, the paternity test report. The cover read, Paternity Identification Report, with Dr. Wong's signature and the official red seal of the West City Health Clinic stamped below it. I opened the file with trembling hands. The report clearly stated, the tested adult, Ethan Miller, and the tested infant share a biological father-son relationship. The date matched last winter, right after Rachel had given birth. Beneath the report was a small stack of papers. I pulled them out and felt my stomach drop. They were grain coupons and remittance slips. Ethan had requisitioned extra rations under the regiment's name, then secretly sold them to a black market grain dealer. The remittance slips showed that the payments were sent to Rachel's younger brother, and the amounts weren't small. So, he hadn't just cheated on me. He was also embezzling military supplies. I quickly took out a notebook and pen from my coat, items I had bought that morning at the supply store just in case, and began to copy the report and remittance information word for word. My hand was shaking so hard that the writing came out crooked, but I focused on getting every key detail right. Just as I finished, footsteps echoed down the hallway. Voices followed. "Have you seen Commander Miller?" "The patrol team spotted him heading this way," one of the soldiers said. Panic surged through me. I shoved the paternity report and remittance slips back into the iron box, locked it, and slid it into the drawer's false compartment. Clutching my copied notes, I turned toward the door, but the footsteps were coming closer. Fast. Then I heard Ethan's voice right outside. "I'm here. Just finishing up some paperwork before heading back." My blood froze. I dove under the desk, holding my breath. The door creaked open and Ethan stepped inside, the smell of alcohol wafting in with him. He must have been drinking with Rachel. He dropped into his chair, exhaling heavily, then pulled a cigarette from his pocket and lit it. Smoke curled under the desk, burning my throat. I clamped my sleeve over my mouth to keep from coughing. "Damn that woman," he muttered under his breath, voice thick with anger. "Why the hell did she keep bringing up Dr. Wong today?" My pulse hammered in my ears. He was talking about me. "Can't let her keep this up," he went on. "If she doesn't learn to shut up, then—" He didn't finish the sentence, but he didn't have to. I already knew exactly what kind of man he was and what he was capable of. I'd seen it once before, at the cost of my life. When he finally finished his cigarette, Ethan stood and walked toward the door. Before leaving, he turned back for a moment, his eyes scanning the room, as if double-checking something. I curled myself tighter, afraid even to breathe. After a long pause, he stepped out and closed the door behind him. I waited until his footsteps faded completely before crawling out from under the desk. My legs were numb, but I didn't stop. I folded my copied notes, tucked them into the lining of my jacket, and retraced my steps through the hallway. I climbed back through the window, slipped out of the building, and ran all the way home. When I reached the courtyard, I saw light still glowing from Rachel's window. Two shadows moved across the curtain, Ethan and Rachel, together. My stomach twisted, but my hand instinctively touched the inner pocket of my coat. The papers were safe. Now, I had proof. The copied paternity report and the evidence of embezzlement. No matter what lies they tried to spin, they couldn't erase the truth. I lay down on my bed but couldn't sleep. The moon hung outside the window, pale and cold. The wind grew sharper as the night deepened. I got up quietly, poured a small bowl of rice soup from the stove, and used it as paste to glue my copied notes onto thick cardboard. The rice soup would dry hard and stick fast, so the pages wouldn't blow away, even in the morning wind. By the time I finished, I had 6 boards in total. On each one, I carefully highlighted 2 key lines. Ethan Miller shares a biological father-son relationship with the child, and military grain funds embezzled and remitted to Rachel Moore's brother. When I looked up again, it was already 4 in the morning. During the brief change of guard between patrols, I slipped quietly out the door, carrying the cardboard posters under my arm. My first stop was the entrance of the military canteen, always the busiest place in the morning. I pressed the first board onto the brick wall directly facing the doors, where everyone lining up for breakfast would see it. Balancing on a stone, I stood on tiptoe and spread the rice paste carefully along the edges to make sure it stuck tight. As soon as I stepped down, I heard voices in the distance. The next patrol shift was coming. My heart jumped. I ducked low and hurried toward the regiment headquarters building. Its outer wall was smooth and wide, the perfect place. I chose a spot near the conference room. There would be a meeting for senior officers that morning. Ethan would have to pass right by here. I had just finished pasting the second board when a sudden bang echoed behind me. The corridor window had been caught by the wind. The noise startled me so badly that my hand trembled, almost dropping the cardboard. I pressed it flat again, waited for my heartbeat to calm, then ran toward the family housing building. That building housed all the officers' families, the most talkative people in the compound. I pasted the remaining 4 boards on each stairwell landing from the 1st to the 4th floor, checking each one carefully to make sure the writing was legible. As I finished the 3rd floor, I heard the creak of a door opening. I crouched at the stair corner and peeked out. It was Captain Zhang's wife, stepping out with a chamber pot in hand. She didn't notice me, but she saw the cardboard on the wall. She leaned closer to read it, then gasped sharply, clutching the pot as she rushed back inside. I didn't need to guess. By morning, the whole compound would be in an uproar. By the time I pasted the last one, dawn was breaking. The eastern sky had turned pale gray. I carried the empty bucket and headed home. On the way, I ran into old Wang, the janitor, sweeping the street. He greeted me with a smile. "Up early today, Mrs. Miller?" I nodded, forcing a calm smile, too afraid to say much in case he noticed anything odd. Not long after I got home, I heard noise outside the gate. Excited voices, hurried footsteps, and someone shouting, "Come quick, there's big news posted at the canteen." I crouched by the door, peeking through the crack. Groups of family members were hurrying toward the canteen, whispering and gasping. Captain Zhang's wife was shouting after them, "Don't bother going to the canteen. They're posted on the office wall too, and the housing building." Moments later, louder commotion erupted in the direction of the headquarters. I knew exactly what that meant. Ethan must have gone to the morning meeting. I changed into a clean blue cotton jacket and followed the crowd, my heart pounding. I needed to see his face myself. When I was still a few dozen feet away from the building, I saw a crowd gathered around the wall, soldiers, officers, even some of the clerks, all pointing and murmuring as they read the boards. Suddenly, the group parted. Ethan came out of the conference room, holding a thick stack of exercise reports, his expression still stern and composed from the meeting. Then his gaze swept casually toward the wall and froze. His entire face drained of color. His steps faltered and he stopped dead in his tracks. From where I stood on the edge of the crowd, I could clearly see his hands begin to shake. The documents in his arms slipped loose and scattered across the ground, some pages fluttering away in the morning breeze. The regimental adjutant bent quickly to help him. "Commander, are you all right? You don't look well." Ethan didn't answer. His eyes were locked on the cardboard posters, his lips trembling, his pale face turning from white to ashen gray. Then, with a sudden outburst, he lunged forward, shouting hoarsely, "Who did this? Who put these up? Tear them down, now! Commander Miller, what are you doing?" A voice rang out from the crowd. It was Officer Wang from the disciplinary committee. No one had noticed when he arrived, but now he strode forward and blocked Ethan's path. "Are the things written here true or false? If you tear them down, it'll only make you look guilty." Ethan struggled to push past him, but Wang held firm. The more Ethan fought, the more people gathered around. One by one, the onlookers' expressions shifted, from confusion to suspicion, then to contempt. Finally, Ethan stopped resisting. His shoulders sagged under the weight of it all, the strength draining out of him as the whispers spread like wildfire through the compound. It was as if all the strength had drained out of him. The documents were still scattered across the ground, and a few soldiers bent to pick them up. One of them froze, holding a page close to his face. The handwriting on it matched exactly the scrawl copied onto the posters. "This handwriting, it looks just like Commander Miller's," someone whispered. "Yeah," another replied. "It even says the remittance was sent to Rachel's brother. But isn't Rachel his sister-in-law? Why would he be sending money to her family? And the paternity report, didn't it say the child was his? I thought that baby was supposed to be a martyr's orphan." The murmurs grew louder, spreading like wildfire through the crowd. Ethan's head sank lower and lower. His fists were clenched so tightly that his nails nearly dug into his flesh. I watched him standing there, stripped of all authority, surrounded by whispers and stares, and I felt no sympathy, only a cold, savage satisfaction. In my last life, when he pushed me into the freezing river, he never thought he'd end up here, exposed before everyone. Officer Wang from the disciplinary committee bent down to pick up one of the posters, studying it carefully. "Collect all of these," he ordered the soldiers beside him. "Keep them as evidence, and send word to suspend the officers' meeting. All regiment-level staff are to report to the disciplinary office immediately." The soldiers moved to gather the posters. Ethan just stood there, frozen like a puppet, letting them take everything without a word. He looked hollow, his face gray and drained of life. At that moment, I noticed Rachel at the edge of the crowd, clutching her child tightly, her face as pale as paper. When she saw Ethan's expression, panic flashed across her eyes. Without a word, she turned and fled, running back toward the housing compound with the baby in her arms. I didn't need to watch anymore. I turned and walked away, heading toward home. I had just reached the gate of the housing complex when I heard hurried footsteps behind me, followed by Rachel's desperate sobs. "Ethan! Ethan, you can't just abandon me!" I turned around. Rachel was running toward me, hair disheveled, holding the crying baby. The other families, drawn by the commotion, followed behind, forming a loose circle around us. Rachel stumbled to a stop right in front of me and dropped to her knees with a loud thud. The baby wailed in her arms as she clutched my legs, tears and snot running down her face. "Lisa, I was wrong, but I had no choice," she cried. "Ethan forced me. He said if I didn't obey him, he'd throw me out of the compound. I'm a widow with a baby. I didn't know what else to do." Her voice trembled pitifully, and immediately the tone of the crowd began to shift. A few women who didn't know the truth frowned, glancing at me with looks of sympathy, as if I were the cruel wife bullying a helpless widow. I almost laughed out loud. Rachel really knew how to play her part, timing her tears perfectly to turn herself into the victim. I stepped back, freeing my leg from her grip, then reached into my coat and pulled out 2 papers: the hush money receipt from Dr. Wong and the copied remittance slips. I held them up high so everyone could see. "Forced?" I said coldly. "Then what about this? This receipt for 50 yuan that Ethan gave you to keep quiet, and these remittance slips, over 200 yuan transferred to your brother's account. All of it came from the grain money Ethan stole. Do you dare say you didn't know about that?" Rachel's sobs stopped abruptly. Her eyes locked on the papers in my hand, her face draining of color until she looked almost ghostly. She reached forward desperately, shouting, "You're lying. You forged those. I've never seen that money." "Forgery?" I shot back. "A single visit to the bank will prove whether it's real or not." I handed the documents to Officer Wong, who had pushed his way through the crowd. "Officer Wong, the receipt bears Ethan Miller's signature, and the remittance slips have the official bank codes. They can be verified easily. And there's more. Ethan bought Rachel expensive fabric and gave her extra ration coupons. All of it was bought with stolen military supplies. Many people here saw it themselves." "I did," someone called out. It was Mrs. Liu, the neighbor from next door. "Last month at the co-op, I saw Commander Miller buy Rachel a piece of velvet. It was expensive too. I remember thinking how strange it was that he didn't buy anything for you, Lisa." "I saw it too," another wife chimed in. "Once Rachel went to the canteen and took 2 extra pounds of white flour. The cook said she was over her ration, but she told him Commander Miller gave her permission. Everyone heard it." One after another, the families began speaking up, voices overlapping as they listed all the times Rachel had received special treatment, all the favors Ethan had given her. The air buzzed with accusations, resentment, and the sound of long-suppressed gossip breaking free, each word driving another nail into Ethan and Rachel's disgrace. Rachel was still kneeling on the ground, her lips trembling, tears no longer coming. She clutched her child tightly, her eyes wide with panic and confusion. Officer Wong held the hush money receipt and the remittance copies in his hand, his face darkening by the second. Turning to the soldiers beside him, he said sternly, "Keep these safe. We'll verify them with the bank later. Also, take Rachel to the disciplinary office. I need to question her alone." Before the soldiers could move, Rachel suddenly jumped to her feet, clutching her child, and bolted toward the housing building like someone possessed. "I'm not going. I didn't do anything wrong. You can't frame me," she screamed. She ran so fast she nearly tripped on the steps, barely caught by a nearby soldier before falling. "Frame you?" I stepped forward, my voice cold as ice. "You took money Ethan Miller stole. You've been living in a house meant for a fallen soldier's widow, and you've passed off your own child as a martyr's orphan, lying to the entire regiment. How dare you talk about being framed?" Rachel swayed on her feet, tears spilling again. But this time, no one pitied her. An older wife sighed heavily from the crowd. "What a shame. She had a decent life and still went and did something so disgraceful. Now she's getting what she deserves." Officer Wong glanced at his watch. "Enough. Take her to the office, he ordered the soldiers. After we finish questioning Ethan Miller, we'll compare their statements. The soldiers responded crisply, taking Rachel by the arms. She struggled, crying out, "I'm innocent. I didn't do anything." But her protests grew weaker, swallowed by the murmurs of the onlookers as they dragged her away. I watched her retreating figure without a flicker of emotion. In my last life, when she and Ethan pushed me into that frozen river, she hadn't thought for a moment that one day she'd be the one standing in disgrace. Turning away, I headed home. Mrs. Liu walked beside me, speaking in a low voice. "Lisa, you did the right thing. Someone like her needed to be taught a lesson. But be careful. Ethan might try to get back at you." I nodded. She was right. Ethan wouldn't go down quietly. He'd fight back, maybe even do something reckless. But I wasn't afraid. I still had his stolen grain ledger, the copied documents, and Dr. Wong as a witness. Whatever tricks he tried, I was ready. Back home, I hid the remaining evidence under the bedding again and checked the doors and windows. The sun was already high, but the tension in the compound hadn't eased. I could still hear people talking outside. Ethan's and Rachel's names whispered again and again, their tones laced with disgust. By afternoon, the noise had died down a little, but the air still felt heavy, thick with unease. As I tidied the room, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me. Later, I found out Ethan had ordered one of his guards to keep an eye on me, afraid I might produce more evidence. Around 3 in the afternoon, there was a knock at the door. When I opened it, Officer Wong was standing there with 2 soldiers, each holding notebooks. "Comrade Lisa," he said, his tone formal, "we need to ask you a few questions regarding Ethan Miller." There was no polite small talk, only the weight of official business. We sat by the heated brick bed in the main room. Officer Wong took out a copy of the posters I had pasted that morning. "You wrote these paternity report and remittance transcriptions, correct? Do you have any other evidence?" I reached under the bedding and handed him the copied ledger I'd taken from Ethan's office. "This is a transcription of his embezzlement records, how much military grain he diverted, where it was sold, and the names of the dealers he worked with. It should all be verifiable." Officer Wong's brows drew tighter as he read through it. One of the soldiers beside him took quick notes. "Why are you only presenting this evidence now?" Wong finally asked, looking up. "Why didn't you report it to the authorities earlier?" "I didn't know before," I said truthfully. "It wasn't until a few days ago that I found out about the child's real parentage. Later, I discovered the evidence of his embezzlement. I was afraid he'd retaliate, so I had to gather enough proof before reporting it." That explanation was half true, half false. I told them the facts, but I hid the most important part, my rebirth. No one could ever know that secret. Officer Wong nodded, not pressing further. He carefully packed away the copied documents. "Thank you for providing this evidence," he said. "We'll verify everything as soon as possible. If we need anything else, we'll contact you again." Before leaving, he reminded me, "Be careful. If anything happens, reach out to us immediately." Then he and the soldiers left. Not long after, I heard heavy footsteps outside the courtyard gate. My stomach tightened. It was Ethan. He wasn't wearing his uniform, just a gray cotton jacket. His face was expressionless as he stepped inside and slammed the door shut behind him. His eyes burned into me, sharp and full of rage. "You gave that ledger to the disciplinary committee, didn't you? So what if I did?" I stayed seated on the bed, refusing to flinch. "You did those things yourself, Ethan. You should have known this day would come." Ethan lunged forward suddenly, grabbing my arm so hard that pain shot through me. "Are you out of your mind? I'm the commander. If you expose me, you'll lose your status. You won't be the commander's wife anymore. You'll be sent back to the countryside to rot in poverty." "The commander's wife?" I yanked my arm free and glared at him. I couldn't care less about that title. I'd rather go back to the countryside and live a hard life than stay with a man like you, a corrupt, cheating liar. Ethan's face turned red, then darkened to an ugly shade of gray. His hand trembled as he pointed at me. "You ungrateful woman. I'll give you one more chance. Go to the disciplinary committee and tell them you forged all the evidence, that you made it up to get back at me. Do that, and I'll make sure you can stay here, live comfortably. Otherwise what?" I cut him off coldly. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out Dr. Wang's hush money receipt. Otherwise, you'll do what you did in my last life? Push me into the ice and kill me again? Ethan Miller, did you really think I'd still be that same fool? I held the receipt up. This document, you can't destroy it. I've already shown it to Officer Wang, and Dr. Wang himself is a living witness. Even if you kill me, you can't erase your crimes. The moment I mentioned the frozen river, Ethan's face went pale. His expression twisted with shock and confusion. He took a step back. How do you know about that? How I know doesn't matter. I slipped the receipt back into my pocket and straightened my back. What matters is this. You have two choices. Cooperate with the investigation and hope for leniency, or keep fighting and make your punishment worse. It's up to you. Ethan stared at me, his eyes full of conflicting emotions. Anger, fear, and a flicker of something like regret. After a long silence, he gave a hollow laugh, one that sounded more broken than defiant. I never thought I'd fall because of you. He turned and walked toward the door. At the threshold, he paused and said quietly, "Take care of yourself." Then he left. I let out a long breath, my whole body trembling slightly. He wouldn't dare harm me now. The disciplinary committee had already begun their investigation. If he retaliated, it would only make things worse for him. Still, I knew Ethan well enough to understand he wouldn't confess easily. He'd try to fight back, twist the truth, anything to save himself. That evening, Mrs. Liu knocked softly on my door. When I opened it, she leaned close and whispered, "Lisa, I just heard. Ethan's at the disciplinary office. He's denying everything, says he never embezzled a thing, and that the paternity report was forged by you." I had expected it. A small smile tugged at my lips. "That's fine," I said calmly. "Let him deny it. The truth won't stay buried for long." "All the evidence is already there," I told Mrs. Liu calmly. "Even if he denies it, it won't change the truth." Mrs. Liu sighed, her brow furrowed. "Don't worry too much, Lisa. Captain Zhang couldn't stand seeing this any longer. He's already gone to the disciplinary committee. He's planning to expose more of Ethan Miller's corruption." "Captain Zhang?" I froze for a moment, genuinely surprised. I hadn't expected him to step forward. In my previous life, I'd barely interacted with him. I only knew that he and Ethan didn't get along, that Ethan had often suppressed him, using his authority to make his life difficult. It seemed Ethan's days of power were finally coming to an end. Outside, the sky darkened. I lit the kerosene lamp and watched the flame flicker, steady and bright. My heart felt unexpectedly calm. The disciplinary committee was verifying the evidence. Captain John was testifying. Soon, Ethan and Rachel's crimes would all be brought to light. The next morning, as I finished sweeping the courtyard, I saw the disciplinary committee's jeep pull up outside the compound gate. Officer Wang and two soldiers stepped out and headed straight for Captain Zhang's house. Mrs. Liu hurried over and whispered, "Captain Zhang arranged to meet with them last night. Today he's giving his statement in person. And I heard there's another witness coming." That caught my attention. I followed quietly at a distance and stopped at the mouth of the alley, watching. Before long, Captain Zhang came out with Officer Wang, accompanied by a man in a blue work uniform, clutching a cloth bundle. That must have been the witness Mrs. Liu mentioned. The group got into the jeep and drove off toward the regiment headquarters. I was about to turn back when I heard someone call out behind me, "Comrade Lisa, wait a second." I turned. It was Captain Zhang's wife. She was holding an envelope. "My husband asked me to give this to you," she said softly. "He said it might help." I took the envelope and opened it. Inside was an old yellowed sheet of paper. At the top it read, "Statement regarding Comrade Zhao Gang." The document was signed by an officer from a border defense unit and dated 3 years ago. The contents were shocking. Zhao Gang had deserted his post in October 1967 and never returned. He hadn't died a martyr, he was a deserter. So Rachel's husband had never been a hero. He was a traitor who'd abandoned his unit. A wave of fury and disbelief surged through me. Ethan hadn't just cheated and stolen, he'd forged a martyr's certificate so Rachel could live in the compound and enjoy the benefits of a soldier's widow. The audacity of it was staggering. Gripping the paper tightly, I hurried toward the headquarters building. As I reached the entrance, I heard raised voices from inside the disciplinary office. Ethan's voice, sharp with anger. "I didn't forge anything. Zhao Gang was a martyr. Captain Zhang is slandering me. Whether it's slander or not, we'll find out from the witness, Officer Wong's calm, commanding voice replied. Comrade Ethan, settle down and listen to what this man has to say. I knocked on the door. Come in, Officer Wong called. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. Captain Zhang sat to one side, silent but steady. The man in the blue uniform stood in the center, holding his cloth bundle. Ethan stood across from them, face ashen, eyes burning with hatred when he saw me. Officer Wong, I said evenly, I have new evidence to submit. I handed him the document. Captain Zhang's wife just gave me this. It's an official report stating that Zhao Gang, Rachel Moore's husband, deserted his unit in 1967. He wasn't a martyr. Ethan Miller forged the martyr certificate so Rachel could live in the compound, making it easier for them to meet in secret. Officer Wong unfolded the paper, reading it carefully before passing it to Ethan. Comrade Ethan, he said, take a look at this. Do you have anything to say for yourself? Ethan's hands shook as he took the document. His eyes darted across the page, his jaw tightening. Then, with a sudden burst of rage, he threw it to the ground. This is fake. You all conspired to frame me. Zhao Gang died in the line of duty. I have the official martyr certificate to prove it. Fake? The man in the blue work uniform suddenly spoke up, his voice trembling but resolute. I was the officer in charge of processing Zhao Gang's discharge back then. I handled the paperwork when he deserted his post. The paperwork was processed by me, the man in the blue uniform said firmly. Zhao Gang was a deserter. He never died in action. Years ago, you came to me and offered 50 yuan to change the record from deserted to killed in service. You even had me forge a martyr's certificate. I've felt guilty ever since, and I can't keep it to myself any longer. The room fell utterly silent. Ethan's face went as white as paper. His legs gave out beneath him, and he nearly collapsed, barely caught by one of the nearby soldiers. His mouth opened and closed soundlessly, his eyes filled with a hollow kind of despair. Even the one thing he cared most about, the false martyrdom that justified his affair, had just been destroyed. Captain Zhang rose to his feet, walked over to Officer Wong, and handed him another folder. Officer Wang, he said clearly, this is evidence of how Ethan Miller has been suppressing me over the years. Because I refused to let him misuse the training funds, he deliberately gave me poor evaluations in every assessment. He even used his authority to transfer my wife to a distant supply station as punishment. I have multiple colleagues who can testify to this. Officer Wang accepted the folder, his expression growing darker with every page he read. Retrieve Zhao Gang's original desertion record immediately. He ordered the soldiers beside him. Also, pull the financial documents for the training funds. Notify all relevant witnesses to report to the disciplinary office this afternoon for official statements. The soldiers saluted and left at once. Ethan leaned back against the wall, staring blankly at the ceiling. His lips moved weakly. It's over. All of it's over. I looked at him, feeling nothing. No pity, no anger, just the quiet certainty that everything he was facing now was the consequence of his own choices. He'd lied, forged records, shielded a deserter, stolen military funds, abused his power, all for his own selfish desires. Every step he took had led him to this moment. Officer Wong checked his watch, then turned to me. Comrade Lisa, he said, thank you for your cooperation and for providing crucial evidence. You can go home for now. We'll contact you if we need you again. Then he looked back at Ethan. Comrade Ethan Miller, you will now cooperate with the investigation and give a full confession. It's your only chance to seek leniency. I stepped out of the disciplinary office. The afternoon sun fell warm across my shoulders. I felt lighter than I had in years. Captain Zhang followed me outside. Comrade Lisa, he said quietly, thank you. If you hadn't brought forward that evidence, I might never have found the courage to speak up. Ethan's been abusing his power for too long. He should have been exposed a long time ago. I smiled faintly. Don't thank me. We just did what needed to be done. On the way back to the housing compound, I could already hear people whispering. Some said Ethan was going to be stripped of his rank. Others said Rachel would be expelled from the compound entirely. 3 days later, in the afternoon, the military district loudspeaker crackled to life, calling all officers and family members to the parade ground for an important announcement. I changed into a clean gray cotton jacket and walked there with Mrs. Liu. The yard was already packed with people, soldiers in uniform, families murmuring anxiously. Everyone knew what this was about. Ethan and Rachel's punishment was coming. A temporary stage had been set up in the center of the grounds with several tables lined up across it. The political commissar, Officer Wang, and several senior officers sat behind them. 2 soldiers stood to the side, flanking Ethan and Rachel. Ethan wasn't wearing his uniform anymore. He looked disheveled, in an old quilted jacket, his hair messy, his head hanging low. Rachel stood beside him, clutching her child, her face drained of color. She kept her eyes down, refusing to meet anyone's gaze. When everyone had gathered, the political commissar cleared his throat, picked up a document, and began to read. His voice echoed through the loudspeakers, sharp and solemn. After thorough investigation by the Military District's Disciplinary Committee, it has been confirmed that Comrade Ethan Miller, former commander of the 1st Regiment, is guilty of multiple serious violations of military discipline and law. The findings are as follows. First, while married, he engaged in an improper relationship with Comrade Rachel Moore, resulting in the birth of an illegitimate child. Furthermore, he conspired to forge a false martyr certificate to disguise the child's true identity and deceive the regiment and its members. Second, the commissar continued, his tone steady and cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. Ethan Miller forged a martyr's certificate and concealed the desertion of Zhao Gang, thereby protecting a deserter and illegally arranging for Rachel Moore to join the military compound. Third, he embezzled military grain and misused training funds, involving a significant sum of money. Fourth, he abused his power to retaliate against subordinates who opposed him, particularly Captain Zhang, whom he repeatedly suppressed. The crowd below erupted instantly. Soldiers and family members whispered in disbelief, pointing toward Ethan. Their faces showed a mix of anger and disgust. In that era, a soldier's discipline and honor meant everything. Ethan's actions were more than just a personal disgrace. They were a stain on the regiment's reputation, a slap to the face of the entire military district. The commissar paused, waiting for the noise to die down. When silence finally returned, he continued reading, his voice echoing through the loudspeaker. According to the disciplinary code of the People's Liberation Army, and upon deliberation by the Military District Party Committee, the following decision has been made. Comrade Ethan Miller is hereby dismissed from his position as regimental commander and expelled from military service. His violations of law and discipline will be transferred to the judicial authorities for further investigation and punishment. The moment the final words were spoken, 2 soldiers stepped forward. With a sharp click, the handcuffs locked around Ethan's wrists. He suddenly jerked his head up, eyes bloodshot, and let out a furious shout. "Lisa! You did this to me. I won't let you get away with it." Gasps rippled through the crowd as people instinctively stepped back. I didn't move. I stood where I was, calm and unshaken. He wasn't the man I once feared. He was just a fallen predator, stripped of everything that made him dangerous. Ethan lunged forward, but he didn't get far. The soldiers tackled him to the ground, pinning him with practiced force. He struggled, shouting curses, but his voice grew weaker and weaker until it faded into incoherent muttering. The commissar looked down at him with a grave expression, then picked up another document. "Comrade Rachel Moore," he announced, "is found to have participated in the forgery of a martyr's certificate, concealed her husband Zhao Gang's desertion, and engaged in an improper relationship with Ethan Miller, thereby damaging another's family and violating military ethics. She is hereby stripped of her military family status and will be returned to her place of origin for disciplinary education under the supervision of local authorities." With a loud thud, Rachel fell to her knees, clutching her child as tears streamed down her face. "I was wrong. Please, give me another chance. I can't go back home. They'll point fingers at me, call me names. Please don't send me back." But no one felt pity anymore. An older woman in the crowd shouted, "You should have thought of that before you did all those shameful things. You brought this on yourself." 2 soldiers stepped forward to escort Rachel away. She clung desperately to the edge of the platform, refusing to move until they pulled her to her feet by force. Her cries, mixed with her child's frightened wails, echoed across the parade ground, growing fainter as she was taken away. The commissar faced the crowd once more. Let this serve as a warning to all. Every comrade must uphold discipline, protect their honor, and preserve the dignity of the army. When the announcement ended, the crowd slowly dispersed. Mrs. Liu found me and took my hand, smiling through her excitement. It's finally over, Lisa. Those two got exactly what they deserved. Now you can live in peace. Captain Zhang came over as well, giving me a firm nod. Thank you, Comrade Lisa. Without your courage and evidence, Ethan Miller might have kept hurting people like us. I smiled faintly, though inside I felt calm, almost serene. Watching Ethan being dragged into the police truck and Rachel being led away, I knew that everything from my previous life, the humiliation, the betrayal, the cold agony of that river, had finally been avenged. The chapter was closed. As I walked home, the setting sun stretched my shadow long across the ground. Around me, people whispered about what had happened, some saying Ethan got what he deserved, others muttering that Rachel's misery was her own doing. I didn't join in. I just walked faster, heading toward home. I wanted to pack my things and leave this place full of memories, both the bitter and the haunting ones. It was time to start a new life. Back home, I opened the wardrobe and packed a few clothes, along with the ration coupons and savings I'd quietly set aside. As I looked around the small earthen house where I'd lived for years, there wasn't a trace of regret. Only a deep, liberating sense of relief. The next morning, just after dawn, I picked up my cloth bundle and went to the housing office to formally return my quarters. The housing manager was an elderly man with graying hair. When I handed him the keys, he looked at me, sighed, and said, "Comrade Lisa, you're really leaving? Won't you stay a few more days?" "No," I said softly. "Everything here is finished. It's time to move on." He nodded, then took a form from the drawer and handed it to me. "Here's your deposit refund. It's all in this envelope. Please check it." I accepted it but didn't bother to count. I slipped the envelope into my pocket. Money wasn't what mattered anymore. I just wanted to leave this place. As I stepped out of the housing office, I saw Captain Zhang standing by the gate, holding a sheet of paper. He walked up to me with a smile. "Comrade Lisa," he said, "this is a letter of introduction I wrote for you. The supply cooperative in the county needs a new shop clerk. I've already spoken to their director. You can start as soon as you arrive." I took the letter carefully. It read, "Letter of Introduction. This certifies that Comrade Lisa Lin is being introduced to your organization for employment. She is an upright, diligent worker and is sincerely recommended for your consideration." At the bottom was Captain Zhang's official red seal. Warmth welled up in my chest. In this place where I'd endured so much, he was one of the few who had truly treated me with kindness. "Thank you, Captain Zhang," I said earnestly. "If I ever have the chance, I'll repay you." He waved his hand. "No need for thanks. You're a good comrade, Lisa. You shouldn't let all that nonsense hold you back. Just work hard and live well. That's what matters most." He helped me lift my cloth bundle onto his bicycle rack and said, "The train to the county leaves at 10 this morning. I'll take you to the station. It's on my way." I didn't refuse. We walked together toward the train station. Along the way, we passed several families from the compound. Some greeted me with nods or words of encouragement, their eyes full of sympathy and respect. After everything that had happened, everyone knew the truth, that I had been wronged and had the courage to expose it. Mrs. Liu came running up before we reached the station, pressing a small cloth bag into my hand. "Here, Lisa," she said warmly. "Boiled eggs for the road. And when you get to the county, write to me, all right?" At the station, there was still half an hour before departure. Captain Zhang helped me place my bundle on a long wooden bench in the waiting room. "I won't go up to the platform with you," he said. "The regiment still needs me. Here's the address and phone number of the supply cooperative in the county. If you run into trouble, call them or write to me." He handed me a folded piece of paper filled with neatly written words. I took it and clenched it tightly in my hand. "Take care of yourself, Captain Zhang," I said quietly. He nodded, then turned to leave. After a few steps, he looked back and waved before walking away. Not long after, the loudspeaker announced the train's arrival. I hoisted my bundle over my shoulder and followed the others toward the platform. Just as I stepped onto the train, A vehicle passed by on the opposite track, a police truck. Through the small barred window, I caught a glimpse of Ethan Miller. His head was bowed, hands cuffed, stripped of every trace of authority and pride. The train began to move, pulling slowly away from the station. I leaned against the window, watching the fields slide past, shrinking into the distance. My heart felt still and calm. This place that had carried so much pain, betrayal, and hatred was finally behind me. The injustice and helplessness of my last life, the struggle and vengeance of this one, all of it was fading away, mile by mile. After more than 2 hours, the train arrived in the county. I stepped onto the platform, holding Captain Zhang's letter of introduction, and followed the directions he had given me. The director of the supply cooperative was a kind, middle-aged woman. When she read the letter, she smiled warmly. "Captain Zhang already told me about you," she said. "Don't worry, Lisa, you'll fit in here just fine. Everyone in this office gets along well." Then she led me to my new dorm room and handed me the key. "Settle in first," she said. "You can start work tomorrow." For the first time in a long while, I felt something stir inside me. A quiet, steady hope. The dorm room was a small brick house tucked behind the supply cooperative. It wasn't big, but it was tidy and bright. The next morning, I started work. Every day, I organized shelves, weighed goods for customers, and kept track of the accounts. My days were full, steady, and peaceful. My coworkers were kind to me. They all knew I'd gone through a lot, yet none of them ever brought up the past. They only talked about small, cheerful things. Funny customers, new products, little stories from home. On weekends, I liked to visit the county bookstore to read or take quiet walks by the river. Sometimes I'd stop to watch the busy streets or the children laughing as they played along the riverbank. Little by little, a sense of belonging grew in my heart. I was no longer the woman who lived in the shadow of hatred and revenge. I was someone who could stand on her own, someone who could find peace and even happiness. One evening, I received a letter from Mrs. Liu. She wrote that Ethan Miller had sentenced to 5 years in prison for embezzlement and forgery. Rachel Moore had been sent back to her hometown. Because of her ruined reputation, she could only make a living by washing clothes and cooking for others. Her days were hard and lonely. After reading the letter, I didn't feel joy or sadness. I simply folded it and placed it in the drawer. Those people, and everything tied to them, no longer had anything to do with me. Standing by the dorm window, I looked out at the moon hanging quietly above the rooftops. My heart felt calm and steady. In my previous life, I hadn't known how to truly live. But in this one, I would make up for everything I'd lost. I would work hard, live well, and make sure I built a life brighter and stronger than anyone could imagine. A soft spring breeze drifted through the open window, carrying with it a gentle warmth. I closed my eyes and breathed it in. My new life was only just beginning.